What's up, everybody? Welcome in to a blowout, but like kind of not edition of SSPN. I don't know how to open this one, Ethan. To be honest, I really didn't get mad about this one because very early on, I kind of accepted inside
hmm
myself that I felt like we were going to lose this one. And then Sandro Mamukelishvili came in and changed everything. And we were able to cut it to single digits, which still, in the grand scheme of things, um, like I feel a lot better talking about this game because they showed some fight and got back in it. We'll get into
hmm
Mamu and the impact we saw from him, which was very similar to the late season Nuggets game from March of last year when he came in and gave Jokic buckets and actually led us to a victory. Unfortunately, that did not happen tonight, but without his impact, we would not have been able to get back into the game like we did, Ethan. But like I said, even though there did end up being somewhat of a chance for the Spurs to actually get a win tonight with the way that the game went, it still kind of feels like a blowout overall because after we subbed Mamu out, the Jazz just did their thing and played the way that they'd been playing earlier in the game. There were some dagger threes from Lauri, Jordan Clarkson. Really, they just got back to what built them the 20-point lead in the first place, where they were blowing us out, for the majority of the game after we subbed him out. So that was really my overall thoughts on this one, Ethan. What were yours before we get in the game flow?
It wasn't pretty. I didn't enjoy myself. Even if the run that Mamu kind of led had worked out in our favor and we had won the game, it would have been a stolen victory. We definitely did not deserve to be within. I think we got it down to what, 8 points, maybe
9.
9 points at the most, with Mamu helping us out at the forefront of that run, obviously. But this was all about the Jazz, and we just dug the biggest hole we possibly could and could not scratch ourselves out of it. I'm talking turnovers. I'm talking low energy play. I'm talking missed threes, wide open threes, and a poor game from the free throw line. Just everything that we could possibly do wrong, we did it in those first 2 quarters. So there was no chance we were going to win this game.
Yeah, on top of that, another storyline, if you will. I'm sure he'll be back
Mm,
very soon. But Keldon Johnson did get
yeah.
benched tonight after giving up that and 1-3 to Lauri. I missed that possession a little bit, but it seems like he was a little slow, maybe a little bit, I hate to say lazy,
hmm
but not as locked in as he should have been on defense there on that play, because immediately after he got subbed out, Pop went up to him and they started to have a conversation. So I
mm,
know, look, Keldon Johnson's the only one who's came into contact with SSPN. So I
True.
kind of feel bad, and now even more than before, because I always loved his personality. But now I'm
hmm
like, man, I feel bad saying that. He's the only one who, you know,
Yeah. It didn't
I
feel
know that
like
doesn't matter
a.
too much. I'm just
No,
joking
I know what
around.
you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying. But it didn't feel like a lazy defensive play. It felt like a frustration play because like he couldn't fight over the screen. He was trying, so he literally just pushed Chris Dunn out of the way. And when he pushed Chris Dunn, that's when his momentum took him forward into Laurie and basically shoulder checked him at the side. And then Laurie drained the three, and then he got benched. And he looked a little frustrated when he was sitting there and Pop came up to him. I couldn't read his lips. I don't know what he said back, but it was one of those moments it felt like where you're like, you did something wrong. And then the coach is coming up to reiterate that same point. So he said something back to Pop and he was pretty much out of the game I think he didn't come back in the game after that. So
Thank you for clearing that up for me, because I
yeah,
didn't
of course.
have full eyes on that possession. So there you go. I did read his lips a little bit,
hmm
and he was just like, I was trying to do this. I don't know what he said
hmm
after that because the camera cut, but he was kind of trying to explain himself a little bit. But after that, he was clapping the entire time on the bench, was vocal, even when other guys on the bench weren't.
mm
Not to say that like they were being bad teammates. I'm just saying like he was trying to contribute, despite being benched. You know what I mean? And that's really, in that situation, all you can really ask for. At least he had a good attitude about it. But
mm.
I'm not completely mad about it. Just because you gotta start sending messages to some of these guys at some point. And with him being one of the elder guys on the team, that the eldest in terms of being on the team the longest. I know he's not the oldest player on the team, but the longest tenured Spur.
Mm,
Um, I understand if Pop felt like it was justified, then I roll with it. So.
agreed. Agreed.
Alrighty, let's get into the game flow of this one then, Ethan. And Vainstain, I just saw your comment. You might have just came in here. You said what happened to Keldon. We kind of just talked about that. So if you want to just rewind like 30 seconds, we went over it. But Ethan, now it is time to get into this game flow. There's not really too much to talk about, obviously. We can talk about the box score a little bit because Devin and Wemby did end up having pretty solid games. But as you can see, I mean, there's some numbers in there like with Malachi and Zach, but really the only other stats when I look at this box score, Ethan, that I think are significant, you could say Trey a little bit. Um,
Hmm.
he played a solid game tonight. He shot really well too. I was like, can he just shoot in Utah? Like the threes he made tonight were swishes all on the left side. They looked really good. I'm not, with his prior history, I'm not expecting that to be a common trend. But we'll see. Maybe that is a sign that he's getting better. But we've also seen other games where he's went 3 for 3 and then we have a long cold stretch. But I will say that was like the best that I've seen his 3-point shot look just in release, the way it went through the basket and going 3 for 4 tonight from there. But
Hmm.
before I was saying that, Ethan, I was going to say that really Mamu are the only that's the only stat line that I look at this and really put a lot of stock into it. Obviously, not a great game from Jeremy. I see that offensively. But there were a lot of things that the Jazz were doing tonight on top of the fact that they have a way more size than us. Like they're bringing Walker Kessler off the bench and then they're starting John Collins and Lauri. Not necessarily, you don't want to, that's not an excuse. Like Jeremy still got beat tonight, but he's also 20. Well, Walker's in his second year too. So no really excuse there, but it's just a tough matchup for the
Hmm.
Spurs. And this team is just, even though they're a play-in kind of fringe team, they're still significantly ahead of us whenever it comes to the amount of talent that they have on their roster as well as experience, um, and also just where they're at in their rebuild as well. And that was another thing that we really noticed tonight. I don't want to get too into everything, but this will be the last thing I'll say on the Jazz before I dish it to you, Ethan,
Mm.
is they had Bryce Sensabaugh and Taylor Hendricks out there. I know Taylor Hendricks ended up fouling out, but we saw him make a lot of good plays. We saw Bryce Sensabaugh get some buckets as well. And after they made their moves at the deadline, moving some of their other rotation players, you can see kind of what former Spur Will Hardy is trying to build out there
Mm.
with those guys kind of around Lauri and Colin Sexton.
Yeah, the Jazz have a lot of versatile size, which is what I think got us. Like they're not just big lumbering dudes. Maybe Walker Kessler, you can make the argument, but everyone else is just tall, lanky, strong, and fast. So they were able to get out in transition, play really good defense, and just had a lot more physicality and energy start to finish of the game. They were getting into our guys, knocking the ball loose, fighting for extra possessions. Colin Sexton is a dog. Like he bothers me when he's on the other team, but if he was on our team, I would love him because he plays with just 110% energy the entire time. And he's not one of the guys that had like a tremendous game statistically, but he definitely helped them kind of push the pace against us and take advantage of a young team's poor transition offense and lack of focus. So I think that's really where the Spurs got. And then on top of what Vane's saying, the altitude, like I don't know how much of an effect that has because I've never played a basketball game in Utah, but it definitely looked like they came out with a lot of energy, like the Spurs. That's my first note about the first quarter is we looked great on that 6-2 run to start the game, and then about midway through, our like Sean was talking about it, our guys had our hands on our knees, kind of breathing a little bit harder than normal, and that's when Utah started running in transition. It basically ran us off the court, and we weren't able to find that momentum until the third quarter with Mamu.
Yeah, that was such a good point. I'm glad Vainstain brought that up because that was something that I texted you like in the first quarter when they went on that counter run that we'll get
Mm,
into here in a second. It was a giant counter run. I'll read the
yep.
numbers, like I said, when we get into the game flow. Um, but I just was like, okay, now we're down and we're in Utah with this altitude. Like we're not gonna have the legs that we normally do. There was one trip that I took to as a little kid because my uncle had a timeshare right outside
Mm,
of Salt Lake. And I can tell you, dude, I can notice it. I noticed it immediately. And
yeah.
there's even like like I wore these little bands as a kid, and it was like they were supposed to help with like altitude sickness, and it was like they're like around like my wrists. Anyways, like I've never done that before, and it was like I think now that I'm remembering, I think I might have went on like a Boy Scout trip or something. No, that was Colorado, but still, that's altitude also. And I lived in Colorado also for about a year and a half when I was younger, and it definitely does. Like if you're not used to it and you're from Texas, for example, that's where you
Mhm.
mainly play your games and live. It's going to make a difference. On top of it being Wemby's first time to experience that. Now, with that being said, he still had a really solid game, and so did Devin. Um, I know some of it is empty stats, with just the way that the game went, but I don't want to take away what they did either, because if they don't play the way that they do, then the Mamu run, if you want to call it that, doesn't even matter.
Mm.
So, and still, I mean, Wemby had 5 blocks again tonight. Like, I'm not going to take that away from him. Devin had 3 as well. I liked his effort
Mhm.
out there. I know you mentioned that overall the team, the intensity was not there. I did see that from Devin kind of throughout
You're
tonight's
absolutely right.
game. And he had 9 boards as well as 5 assists tonight, shot efficiently as well. So, those two, once again, as the theme continues throughout the season, those are really, our two
Mm.
guys right now. Those are our two kind of franchise pieces, if you will, at least when it comes to scoring.
Yeah, their duo, their chemistry together is really building. And everything negative that I'll say about this game when we get to the game flow, pretty much exclude Victor Wembanyama, Devin Vassell, and Sandro Mamukelashvili. Like those 3 guys played phenomenally. And even Wemby and Devin, they benefited from Mamu being on the floor, offensively and defensively. Like Mamu made a lot of key stops, and he was able to be that glue guy to make the extra pass, and play like 2-man game with both of those guys, Devin and Wemby. Like they're the reason that we were able to go on that run. And Devin's leadership, being a vocal leader, was definitely on display tonight, as far as just yelling at guys to get back on defense, telling them to push the pace, and communicating with Pop a lot. Like that's usually something you see him do with Trey Jones or even Keldon. Tonight it was Devin. He was going back and forth from Pop in the court during timeouts and during free throws. So definitely excited to see kind of what he's able to bring moving forward from a leadership perspective.
Absolutely. We'll get into the game flow now. You want to start this, or
Sure, I can go ahead.
let's do it?
Defense turns into offense is my first note. That 6-2 run was solid. The focus was attacking the paint. Devin had a nice poster over like 3 guys, and then Wemby. That was right after the Wemby block, I believe, which was crazy. Um, Trying to push the pace. Trey defending well on Keontae George. What's allowing the Jazz to get back into the game? Silly turnovers. And then Jazz defense giving us issues in the half court. I wrote, "Are we gassed?" Question mark, because the energy definitely took a dip midway through this first quarter. And then I said, "We lost all energy. Our Jazz are being physical. They're running us out of the gym." Trey airballs a 3 on a 2-for-1 opportunity at the end of the quarter. And at that moment, we were 1 for 7 as a team from deep. That's with 30 seconds left in the game. So obviously, the Utah Jazz were hitting their shots. We were not. However, one little bright spot at the end of this first quarter, Jude. Zach Collins hit the last 3 of the quarter for us.
One of 2 threes actually from
Mm-hmm.
him tonight. Yeah, I could read all of my notes, Ethan, but really the bottom line for us is kind of what you mentioned, those turnovers. I wrote down turnover fest for us
Mm-hmm.
about the 6-minute mark. And that at the end of the day, that's really what killed us. We had 6 turnovers with 2 minutes and 25 seconds left, and the Jazz already had 9 points off of those turnovers. Because we're talking about this, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the team stats here, because I'm just curious what their, end of night totals ended up being on those numbers. So where are points off turnovers? Well, we had 34 points off turnovers.
Well, look at their fast break points. That's 28-16 in favor of the Utah, and we had 3 more turnovers.
Maybe we
That's
did get
misleading.
better. That feels like it's flipped. I feel like they got it wrong.
Well, I think maybe that's from when Mamu came in and we had some stops and we were getting out in transition. But you're right when you say that they were getting a lot of easy baskets off of silly mistakes made by us.
Yeah, and we still had 20 turnovers to their 17 as well.
Hmm.
So that point didn't go as well as I thought it would, Ethan, but still, if you watch this game, you know that turnovers were definitely a big issue for us tonight.
Hmm.
Um, but the other huge thing in this first quarter, Ethan, so we had that 6-2 start, right?
Hmm.
It was a 30-11 run after that.
Yeah.
Once we took out Wemby, like that's been a common theme for this team is we have dips, but that's why I mentioned the size earlier because they left in Walker Kessler and or not left in, excuse me. They subbed in Walker Kessler and left in Lauri. So
Hmm.
basically the second half of that first quarter, that was the front court that we were facing and it's basically Zach and Chetty going up against that.
And then plus you have Taylor Hendricks, who's basically a four that's playing the three for them. Like, and he's a guy that we were both high on. Like, I remember doing our draft
Yes.
profiles. We were like, if we have like the third or fourth pick, I consider taking Taylor Hendricks instead of Jarris Walker. Like, that was an actual conversation that we had. And if you
Who's still in the G League?
Jarris Walker, you're right. And Taylor Hendricks didn't have like a phenomenal game statistically, like 1 for 5 from three, but he's like their version of Jeremy right now. But maybe with a little bit more athleticism, honestly,
And
and
shooting ability.
yeah, way more raw. But that's saying something considering Jeremy's still raw, but just kind of similar role for them. But he's not needed to score as much as we need Jeremy to score, obviously, because we don't have as many weapons.
Absolutely. So when we took Wemby out, Lauri and Walker Kessler, well, and when I say Walker Kessler, I mean him just being next to Lauri opened up a lot more things for Lauri.
Hmm.
And Lauri was already going to be able to dominate in a matchup against Zach or Shetty Osman. Um, so that was the other thing I had written down at the end. Lauri was dominating late in that quarter. We also wasted a challenge in the first
We
quarter
did.
that was just obvious. Like after I
Hmm.
saw the replay, I was very surprised because normally whenever we go for challenges, there's somebody in the back, like one of our coaches in the second row, and he'll like look at the replay and then tell Pop if it's good. I think Pop just kind of impulsively did it. And it kind of wasted it later. And it sucks because later on, even though the game was out of reach, even in this scenario, this was before the Mamu run,
Mm.
but Julian got a block on Colin Sexton, I believe, and we weren't able to challenge that. And it was obviously all ball. So that did come
Hmm.
back to bite us.
For sure. And one last note I forgot to mention about the first quarter. Wemby actually played till like the 340 mark ish, which I think is like the longest he's played in a first quarter span. But the first two subs were Keldon and Blake, who actually came in, replacing Julian and Trey, which I think that's the first time that's been the first sub is those two guys together. So I thought that was interesting.
I agree. Yeah, no, I noticed that lineup as well because I think it was Blake, Devin, Keldon, Jeremy, and
Hmm.
Victor.
Yep.
Definitely Pop toying with some stuff.
Hmm.
Uh, and I don't want to speculate completely. I think the reason was completely justified, and I don't know. I'm not in the locker room. I'm not Pop, not on the team. But I think that benching Keldon and then we end up seeing Mamu later, I think Pop did want to give Mamu a look. Like I think that is something that at some point this season he wanted to do. And maybe because he didn't get subbed in until later, and the game was also out of reach as well, that wasn't necessarily in the plans, I guess, when he first benched Keldon.
Hmm.
But I think that is something that it was nice that it's just something we got to see because of that benching.
Pop's notorious for that, right? Like that's like part of the reason he's the greatest coach of all time. Is like we're down by 20. And he's like, screw it. Let's put in some random guy at the very bottom of the bench, and that random guy leads a comeback. Like I think the first one I think of is Steve Kerr in the conference finals against the Mavericks when he was like 37. We were losing. And he was like, screw it, Steve Kerr, you're in. And then Steve Kerr hit like 4 threes in a row and brought us back, and we ended up winning that game, going to the finals. So it's like those moments. That's what makes him such a great coach. I'm just happy. It just sucks that it wasn't able to lead to a win, but still, it had the right effect.
Right. And like we said, Mamu got his win against Jokic last year in March.
He
Like
almost
that's
had two of those moments.
dude,
Yeah.
thinking back on that, like that's the future like champions. And it
Hmm.
was in March. Like it wasn't even like, we caught him early in the season. It was just
Hmm.
Mamu came in and got the job done. But I think that Robert Ball has a good analysis of the first quarter here also, Ethan. He says, story of the first quarter, the Spurs shared the ball with everyone, even the
Hmm.
Jazz.
Well said, Robert.
But let's move into that second quarter, Ethan. I'll start this one. To be honest, after the first quarter, a lot of my notes were just kind of keeping track, like how much we were down. Did we cut in a little bit? Okay, now we're down again, but I'll just read you what I wrote. More of the same to start,
Hmm.
referring to the 30-11 run. Then we officially went down 20 with 9 minutes and 19 seconds left. I think we cut into it a little bit, but then went back down to 21 with 7 minutes left. Um, I wrote down getting clapped because that's the only way I could describe it. Um, let's see. What are some other important things? Hendricks and Sensabaugh. Malachi was making shots. I'm just writing down things that I saw. He did make
Hmm.
some shots there. That's why he had 14 tonight. Devin does have the intensity tonight, despite the team's poor execution. That's what I kind of alluded to earlier. And then we were still down 22 with 4 minutes left. And we lost this quarter, even though we lost the first quarter by more, 32-18. This really felt like the worst quarter of the game to me. And maybe there were some other turnovers from the Jazz in this quarter that kind of allowed us to get some fast breaks that made it only a 10-point loss. But looking back on this game, Ethan, when I was watching it, I felt like this was the ugliest quarter of the game. And
It's a
maybe
toss.
that's just, sorry to interrupt you. Maybe that's just because the first quarter was, we had like the 6-2 start.
That's exactly what I was about to say. There was one bright moment in that first quarter, and there was pretty much zero bright moments in the second quarter. I wrote down a lot of the same stuff. My first note was overall same exact problems as the first quarter, um, but I did have a couple positives just to change things up a little bit. I'm liking Malachi's approach. He's getting to his spots. He knocked down two of his first three shots. And something that I noticed the past few games is he really hasn't been getting to his spots like he was last season. He feels kind of out of rhythm. Um, Felt like he kind of found that rhythm a little bit tonight. 5 for 12, so not great efficiency, but he did have 14 points, and at least is moving kind of the similar fashion that he was last year when he was playing better. Um, Blake not scoring, but still felt like he was operating well as a point guard. Guys just weren't hitting their shots. He had 5 assists, but he should have had a lot more. Guys were missing wide open threes, and he's really developed that Steve Nash way of keeping his dribble alive and running in circles basically in the restricted section until he's able to find a wide open shooter. And he continues to impress me with the way that his vision has grown. How many turnovers did he have? 0 turnovers from Blake Wesley. I will continue to love that statistic because that's really what his main issue was last year as a rookie was decision making. That has improved greatly. And then the last thing I wrote, Devin to Wemby lob. They're trying, but we can't get it.
And that's why we opened this up by talking about how we're kind of excluding
Mm-hmm.
Mamu, Devin, and Wemby whenever it comes to all the criticisms tonight. The other thing that I had written down that kind of ties into what you just talked about with Malachi, I finally got the Spurs broadcast,
Mm-hmm.
and Bill and Sean were talking about how Pop said they sent a message to Malachi like a couple games ago, or maybe it was the most recent game. And so that's just something to keep an eye on. And that's kind of another thing that ties into Keldon getting benched. Like it seems like at this point in the season, now that we're approaching March, we're after the All-Star break, like we just mentioned in the last podcast that we did. And they're holding guys, it seems like they're pushing the standard a little bit
Mm-hmm.
up. Obviously, it's not giantly high. We're 11-47.
Mm-hmm.
Not trying to misconstrue what I'm saying here, but those are things they're getting on them more, at
Mm-hmm.
this point of the season as opposed to earlier in the year. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they're raising the bar. There's not as many excuses. It's time to send some messages, and I think that message was actually sent back when they benched him. And the message was basically he's too lackadaisical. I listened to the Pop press conference where he talked about it. They told him you're too lackadaisical on both ends of the court, so they stopped playing him for a little bit. Now he's back in the rotation after the Doug trade. And I think he's taken a little bit of a turn. He's still not where he should be,
Right.
but it's a movement in the right direction.
Thank you for summing that up, because as soon as I saw that, I was like, I need to be listening to more
Mm.
pop pressers. It's just when I go and look at the pop pressers, I see they're like a minute most of the
Yeah, they're
time.
always so short.
And I'm just like, I feel like I can find like the important stuff on Twitter
Mm.
because they're so short. And
They're so.
usually it's quotes from Tom Orsborn from the San Antonio News Express. He usually
Mhm.
tweets out the good stuff. So that's usually what I check. But thank you for summarizing that, because I was intrigued after I heard Sean and Bill talk about that.
Mhm.
You want to give your third quarter notes?
Sure. 10-6 start, playing with more urgency. Devin playing with great energy. 2 threes from Trey Jones, like you said earlier, both looked very good. Devin had a block followed by a putback, and when he blocked that shot, he said, "My favorite quote in basketball history: Give me that." Y'all know what I mean by
He said it
Um,
a couple times tonight.
yeah, I mean he's improved as a come from behind shot blocker. Looking a little bit like LeBron James, arguably one of the best players of all time. Anyway, um, we keep fouling on drives is what I put. We can't like every time they drive in, it's gonna be a foul. Usually on my guy Zach. All right, he only had two, but he had a couple just like reach down.
Throughout the season, though.
Yeah, it's been a problem for since game one. But Mamu and Zach actually balling. LOL was my next note. Mamu Kelashvili came in and was immediately an Energizer Bunny, made the right extra pass. He's just a smart player. And Sean continued to harp on, like, he just makes the right decision. He's always in the right spot. And he kind of gave, like, I don't know what it was, the confidence, the energy, whatever it was needed to kind of propel us on a little bit of a run there in the third quarter. However, turnovers are still biting us in the back. Um, Blake continues to facilitate well. And then we gave up a lob to end the quarter to Mr. Walker Kessler. So it was definitely a better quarter, but not perfect. And we needed to make some stops. Obviously, we didn't.
Yeah, actually won this quarter 35-30. So that's been a storyline all season. Not as much as of late. When we were like losing, we'd lost like every third quarter for like forever earlier in
Mm.
the beginning of the season. But still, with the way that the first half had gone, that was a big response. And you got to give them credit for at least winning a quarter tonight in a game that was a blowout for the most part.
Yep.
I had a lot of the stuff that you had written down, like the Trey threes, the Devin block. We actually did cut it to 15 at one point, before Mamu even got subbed in, but then John Collins immediately got an and one.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were back up to 21 by 6 minutes left in the quarter. We got it down to 19 with 5 minutes. Then they got back up to 21 with 3:36. We were 5 of 12 from the free throw line at the 3-minute and 15-second mark in the third quarter. We'll go back and look at those. Well, no, we actually got those right in front of us. We're technically finished 12 of 19, but as y'all can tell, 5 of 7. So we made every free throw after that to finish the game.
Mm.
But still, that start, Ethan, like I mentioned that we cut it to 15 earlier. If we had made every free throw to that point, that would have been cut to 7.
Yeah, looking at this, it really was just like the first half. We were absolutely terrible. Like I said at the beginning, we said we dug a hole that was just way too big with every possible mistake you could make.
All those turnovers, man, like
Mm-hmm.
we mentioned. The other thing I have written down, you already kind of talked about it, but Mamu came in at 3:13, and he came in and did positive things, man. Like you said, you weren't sure how to describe it. I think it was just with the way that the game had been going, him coming in and playing hard with the bench unit.
Mm-hmm.
I think that just kind of gave him an extra boost. Like when they saw him making plays, that kind of, upped everybody else's intensity on the floor. They were inspired by it, if you
I'm
will.
pretty sure in the third quarter he had like 6, 2, and 2, like within 5 minutes of coming in. So like he was immediately a spark plug.
I was texting a group chat, a Spurs group chat, and somebody said he has a point for every minute he's been in. And you just said he was only 5 and he had 6, so that's actually a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't double check that, but
I don't
I
know if that's
believe it.
right either, but
Yeah.
it was something like that.
That was the type of impact he had. We got it down to 15, but the last thing I had written down was can't get a stop. I'm
Mm.
sure that's referring to that lob, like you mentioned, that kind of took away all the momentum again and made me think, okay, now they're about to go on their run again. Which, although that was delayed, because I'll jump into my fourth quarter notes here, Ethan, we got it all the way down to 9 to start that quarter. I believe both of the 2 steals from Mamu in this game both came in that fourth quarter. They were one, I think, ended up being a turnover from somebody else after he got the steal, but the other one, I believe, led to a bucket. I'm blanking a little bit on what happened on both of those, but now I'm remembering a little bit more. He was guarding a 3-point shooter in the left corner, and they cut to the basket, and he followed him the whole time and read the pass, had his arm out, got it, and then led the fast break.
It
The
was
other
a
thing,
pass to Lauri, yeah.
and that makes it even more impressive. And the other thing was this in the third or the fourth when we actually had the clear out possession for him.
That was the end of the third.
Okay, that's what I thought. I'm going to go back a little bit because I was texting you and I jokingly said clear out for Mamu. And then we did, and he got a floater off a pick and roll. But the thing I was reminded of with Mamu in this game, Ethan, and then I'll kind of dish it back to you for the fourth quarter, is how he plays the 3 for the Georgian national team. And I really liked seeing him next to Wemby at the 4. Granted, I mentioned how he did this in the Nuggets game last year, and then we gave him some more minutes, and it wasn't as great, So I don't know if this is going to be a consistent thing for Mamu, but I will say with his performance tonight, I think he has earned himself an opportunity at some minutes. Now, I'm thinking about this. Maybe we could throw him out there instead of Shetty from time to time. Both of those guys are on expiring deals also. So there's
Might as
kind of
well.
the thought process of it. Right. And nothing crazy, just like a couple here and if we keep seeing, some good things with Mamu at the 4, because really we've only seen him at the 5 this season, like when Zach's got in foul trouble and Barlow's in the G League. So I would really like to see Mamu at the 4. And I don't want to get too crazy here because maybe he gets abused defensively if we put him here, but I really wouldn't mind even seeing him at the 3 in a certain lineup, Ethan, with some of the stuff I saw tonight.
Well, if he's playing alongside Keldon, they kind of both are like 3-4 combos, sort of, kind of. So I don't hate it. Might as well. I mean, like you said, Chetty's contract is expiring. He didn't necessarily have a phenomenal game. He had 4 turnovers with only 3 points in 15 minutes. So, sure, let's give Mamu some minutes, see what he's able to do. I'm not against it.
We're 11-47.
Exactly.
If it causes more losses, oh well, the draft odds are higher.
Exactly. Let's figure out which guy we're bringing back, Mamu or Chetty.
These are the big questions, Ethan.
This is what's going to turn us around.
We still have the open roster spot for at least another this is February, so this ends March 1st. That's going to be the deadline. So that's like 4 days from now. We'll see what happens with Marcus Morris. But getting back to the fourth quarter, I wrote down Mamu masterclass. Great defense from the Georgian. I was just trying to have some fun with this. We subbed him out, and there was an immediate 3 from Taylor Hendricks, who was playing the 4. So that was just wonderful because it was like as soon as we subbed Mamu out, he had made those 2 defensive plays. We immediately gave up a 3 to the guy that he was guarding, or the position that he was guarding. And we couldn't get a stop again. We had a turnover that allowed them to go up 15 again, and then Pop called a timeout. We did put Mamu back in, but it was already over at that point. Lauri hit a crazy 3, and then I wrote down Jordan Clarkson dagger to go up 113-95 in the corner. There was still 5 minutes left, but they just seized all the momentum again and got back to what they were doing in that first half. And then the last thing I wrote down, Trey can shoot in Utah, ? Which I already mentioned, but I had to mention it again.
It's worth mentioning. Next game in Utah, Trey's going to have 6 threes. I wrote down pretty much the same thing. I wrote down that I loved Devin being vocal. Spurs are playing with high energy, cut it to 13. Mamu is the glue. great defense from Manu, timely stops, cut it 10-9 in all caps, and then great drive and finish from Malachi Branham. A tough finish in transition. I think it was on that steal that you talked about on Lauri, who was cutting baseline that Mamu got, that led to a Malachi tough layup over John Collins, I think maybe. But it was really nice physical play from him. And then, like you said, they retook the momentum after we subbed out Mamu, and it was wraps. Jazz win.
Absolutely, Ethan. I've got just a couple little things that we kind of alluded to earlier. You okay there?
Yeah, I don't know why I did that, but it felt right.
Okay. Well, I mean, the Spurs kind of got knocked down a peg in this game.
I don't know. I honestly have no idea. I know. You know what? I thought to myself, my thighs are sweaty on this chair, and for some reason, the solution was to lower myself, but
It didn't help.
it didn't.
I didn't mean to be a jerk there when
No,
I
no.
said that. But I've been there. I really have. Not like that exact situation, but I've been there where like I've thought like, oh, like this is a thought, here's how I can fix it. And then it's like, oh wait, that does nothing to fix it.
I'm still sweaty.
No.
I'm just lower now.
Okay, seriously. Zach Collins, we saw a lot of comments earlier, just talking about him. And I know we talked so much about this whole Barlow thing. I'm not even trying to talk about that. I feel like I do agree that his stat line is misleading tonight. I'm kind of surprised. It does make me feel a little bit better about his performance. Like I've got to give him some credit here, but still, what were your thoughts on his performance tonight? Because there was a lot of people talking about it, and I do feel like the stat sheet is a little misleading, but it also reminded me that it wasn't as bad as the eye test, I guess you could say.
The first half was really, really bad, and I think what made it worse is that he missed 4 of 5 free throws. But I felt like he played pretty well in that third quarter comeback next to Mamu. He had some nice moments, had a couple nice post moves, layups, and then the best thing was that he hit 2 of his 3 threes, and they looked smooth. He took a pull up mid range jumper from the top of the key, banked it in. Like he had a couple nice moments, but overall, it definitely didn't feel like a 17.8 rebound game. Like that's misleading, but he did shoot it efficiently.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, Ethan, I'm realizing probably a lot of that has to do with the second half and playing in garbage time specifically.
That's also true. That's also true.
He technically didn't have the lowest plus minus tonight, but as much as Jeremy didn't have a great game, offensively, it wasn't like he forced a ton, and he still did other things, like had a steal and a block, found a way to get some rebounds and assists. I know that's not everything. I'm not trying to say this is a good Jeremy game, but like if you notice, like Zach's 1 for 5 from the free throw line, missed 10 shots as well.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of felt like that's why his plus minus is where it's at, despite 17, 8, and 3.
Yeah. Jeremy, just to touch on what you just said, I think his strengths come from being super athletic and just being in the right place at the right time, fighting for extra rebounds, getting putbacks, cutting to the basket. And all of those strengths were minimized when he's playing against John Collins, Taylor Hendricks, Lauri Markkanen, and Walker Kessler. Like those are all long, athletic guys that can keep up with him and not allow him to do the things that he likes. So he's relegated to just kind of standing along the perimeter. So defensively, he played pretty okay. I felt like pretty much like a normal Jeremy defensive game, but offensively was just he couldn't find a way to impact the game.
Yeah, that's the best way you could put it, is you couldn't find a way to impact the game. And the thing that I was thinking about just talking about Jeremy was it wasn't like he tried to force it too much either, like we've seen earlier in this season. So
True.
as I was not surprised, but when I saw that stat sheet, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. He didn't really do much tonight. Like it didn't necessarily stick out to me. You just didn't really notice him that much, which isn't a great thing either. But
True.
You completely covered it whenever it comes to the matchup.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
No problem. No problem, big dog.
Little dog right now. I lowered myself.
Nazcraz says, I think we know what we have in Trey and Zach. I want Barlow, Mamu, and Sidi minutes for the rest of the season.
Hmm.
I think we're going to see more minutes from those guys, just like we
Mhm.
did last year. Obviously, CD wasn't on the team, but y'all get what I'm saying. Like the rookies that maybe haven't had minutes. Like I said in our last All-Star break recap, our All-Star break recap, probably, especially with sending Barlow back down too, I think they're probably going to play out the rest of this G League season. And then once it ends, we will start to see them on the team and maybe getting some minutes. But we'll have to see. I think that'll still be probably like at least past the midway point of March, probably.
Hmm.
But now that I think about it, Ethan, when does the season end? Let's go ahead and check that because it's the
Isn't
end
it
of
late
April, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, we go into the
April?
second week of April. Okay. Yeah. So we'd still have at least a significant amount of time. I know in the past, like seasons have ended literally at the start of April. So when I said that, I was like, wait, maybe it would be a little bit earlier, but
That might be a dub there. April 14th, last game of the year.
it may be, Ethan.
Our next win is April 14th.
We will have to see. We talked about the Mamu, potentially him getting minutes moving forward. With Keldon, you're pretty confident that
Mhm.
he'll be back to his normal minutes probably next game.
Yeah, I would say so.
Is there anything else that we can really take away from this Jazz game, Ethan?
Keontae George, I hope we do something mean to him soon.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, I hope we get him in the future.
I like him a lot,
He's from
but
Louisville and
he
Baylor, former
he
Jeremy teammate.
he made me mad early because Wemby posted up on Taylor Hendricks and tried a couple spins and didn't really get anything, and then I think Taylor Hendricks might have knocked the ball out of bounds, but it was like a good defensive play. So like we're all resetting offense, and Keontae George goes, "Hell yeah, Keontae, lock his ass up," or something like that, or hell yeah,
He said,
Taylor, hell yeah, Taylor Hendricks, like talking to Taylor, lock his ass up. And I was like, Keontae, game just started. Like now all I want is to just destroy you. Just you. Like I don't even care if we lose. But obviously it didn't happen. He actually kind of had a bad game tonight, efficiency wise, but that made me mad.
when you first said that, I thought he legitimately referred to
Oh,
himself in third
himself? No, no,
person.
no, no.
I was
He's
gonna be,
talking to I think he said T. Actually, I think he called him T.
yeah. Was he guarding? I'm blanking. I'm sorry. It's been 42 minutes, and this was a
Mhm.
rough game. Was that on Wemby? Was he saying that to Wemby?
Yes.
Yeah, or about Taylor Hendricks guarding Wemby? Yeah, that would have ticked me off too.
And then Chris Dunn. Oh, I only hate him because of him and Jeremy got into it
Yeah,
before. But anyway, I want to see a good fight, Jude. I haven't seen a fight in a while on the Spurs.
we haven't got one this season, and I think like earlier in our predictions, or I'm
I think I said
fumbling this.
5, didn't I?
You said like Zach, he's going to get in some fights this year, and we really haven't. I think there was one scuffle, but it wasn't really like a full on fight earlier this year. I can't even remember who it was against
That's
now.
why we're losing. Remember how many times Zach fought somebody last year, and we won like I know we didn't win that many more games, but we won a few more. Like that's what's going on. That's what's missing.
Absolutely, that's if we fought more, Ethan, we'd be undefeated.
I want to see some blood, man. Oh, you know what we haven't talked about? Last thing, I swear,
Okay,
and then
no, go
we'll
ahead.
we'll wrap this up. How about my boy Drew Eubanks taking a full on punch to the mouth from Isaiah Stewart and swallowing it? Swallowing it. Soft
He's
punch.
right here. He's still on my wall. I've got his signature. There was that Sharpie that's on my wall right now. It touched Drew.
Bring back Drew Eubanks.
Dude,
That's
the
my motivation.
the Eubanks Barlow front court.
Oh boy, howdy. We would watch every game like with 110% focus if they were both playing together. Our two boys? Oh my
That
goodness.
would be crazy. Speaking of former Spurs, Ethan, Lucas Samanich came in,
Oh
had a
yeah.
turnover.
We
Was
got
he
excited.
scared? Did Pop scare him still?
You might have. I'm not even convinced he speaks English yet.
Oh, Lucas Samanich, Will Hardy gave you a chance. If you guys enjoyed the Spurs content tonight, don't forget to hit that like and that subscribe button below. If you want to stay updated with the channel, you can check out our community tab on YouTube. You can also follow us on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, at SSPN on YT, also at Jude McLaren, at Ethan_Quintero. And if you want to support the show, and maybe you saw my hat and said, that looks pretty cool, go ahead and check out our merch site. Ethan's got one in the back too. If you want to get yourself a rope cap, you can scan this QR code, or you can go to the link in our channel description or the video description below. We appreciate you guys. Thanks for hanging out with us in this doozy of a Spurs season, to say the least. We'll still be here, and stay tuned to the channel to see when our next post game is or our next live. We'll catch y'all.